Thanks everyone for joining us today for our webinar. It's part of our bi-monthly series, Cybersecurity Best Practices. Today, we'll be talking about some essential and budget-friendly tools and strategies that K-12 districts can implement right now to significantly improve their cybersecurity posture and make sure they're protected. And then we'll also discuss some best practices and see what a comprehensive solution would look like. My name is Daniel Eickhoff. I'm a K-12 cybersecurity specialist here at Secures 360. I've been with the company for about 2 years, and we help school districts with their cybersecurity operations, their cybersecurity protection. And to my knowledge, we are the only leading vendor in our space that is exclusively working with school districts.
And my name's Jeff Teitelbaum. I'm a senior solutions engineer here at Secures 360.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, and before we get started, a quick housekeeping note. Please feel free to use the Q&A tool to submit your questions. At the end of the presentation, we'll have time to answer those questions. And before Jeff will dive in, let's take a look at the unique challenges that school districts are facing today. COSIN, and that stands for Consortium of School Networking. And I hope everyone on the call is following these guys because they are putting out a ton of great content year round. And once a year, they do this large study. And last one was published just this April. And COSIN has found that just like last year, cybersecurity was once again the #1 priority for EdTech leaders. And despite the fact that it's the #1 priority, most districts they have found are not equipped to protect themselves. 2/3 of the districts feel that they don't have sufficient resources to deal with cybersecurity issues, and 66% of all districts surveyed do not have any cybersecurity staff. And that's a real issue. Of course, school districts, no school district ever want to suffer a breach, but the stakes just went up even more because in June, the court in Clark County, Nevada, allowed a class action lawsuit to go forward against Clark County School District. And they found that the district might not have had sufficient cybersecurity protection in place. And what's changing is that until recently, we were just saying, okay, do your best in regard to cybersecurity. But now we're starting to hold districts accountable and responsible if they don't put the defenses in place that they need to have to protect their students and their staff's sensitive information. But the problem, of course, is that we are asking these K-12 IT teams too much. They don't have the resources to cover all this, to do cybersecurity to the level often that it is required. And then, of course, when, and it's not if, it's when the inevitable attack happens, they're vulnerable. So let's take a look at the unique challenges that these districts are facing. Thousands, if not tens of thousands of student devices, many of them personal devices. And then you have remote environments, you have cloud environments. The attack surface is just constantly growing. It's virtually impossible for districts to maintain the visibility they need without automation and without integrated solutions. And again, attacks are coming in more frequent and more sophisticated than ever. And these district teams, they are already maxed. They're so busy keeping their IT running across their different campuses, keeping all the devices working. And now, on top of all of that, they are being asked to go out there and investigate and implement and manage cybersecurity strategies and cybersecurity solutions. It's a tall order. And I just mentioned that the number of attacks is going up so much, and one of the factors in that development is that in the last couple of years, a lot of these ransomware gangs have restructured as ransomware as a service operators, RAS. And what that means is that essentially each of these RAS groups can now target hundreds of school districts simultaneously. They don't necessarily focus on the larger districts anymore, which they kind of arguably used to maximize the potential payout. Now it's more a numbers game. They are casting a wide net and they randomly just see who they can catch. And we actually did a webinar about this a couple of months ago, and where we go into a lot of detail on how this all works and how it affects the school districts. And we have that available on our website. You can just go to our website and navigate to webinars, and there it is available to watch freely. You don't have to put in your contact information or anything like that. It's open. It's not gated. So check it out. But here is what these teams are up against. 3,557,541. It's a big number. I can barely say it. What do you think that number is? And I know you guys are on mute, but I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about it. This is the number of event logs that an average school district's environment is generating every single day. Event logs, one district, one day. So obviously without EDR, MDR, or an MXDR solution, it's impossible to find those events in there that are potentially malicious. It's like looking for the proverbial needle in the haystack. But 38, what do you think this number is? So 38 is the number of alerts that are generated by a suitable platform after analyzing these 3.5 million events, and then generating these actual alerts. Still way too much to manage for the average K-12 IT team. So you definitely want to work with an MDR partner who has a full SOC team, so that they can review and investigate these 38 alerts. And in our case, we boil it down to under 3 alerts per day. So we silence benign alerts. There's some flat out false positives. Our SOC team goes through all of them, and then we have 1 or 2 or 3 alerts that we send to our client and say, hey, this is potentially an issue. Let's look at it together. And then, of course, we also provide what we call guided remediation, which is with the alert, we give them a narrative and give them ideas on how to remediate the issue. Because in reality, if we look at these numbers, the districts fall in one of the following 3 categories, right? So you have districts who try to do it themselves. But as we just saw, it's just too much. And the team quickly burns out, and that's what we call alert fatigue. Then you have districts that are working with a managed service provider. So they have some help. MSP might be managing their EDR or their firewall. And but if they look at those threats, how reliably can they detect real threats? Without a SIEM, without advanced filter rules, they can't be nearly as effective as a dedicated SOC team, right? Our SOC team, for example, the platform is using sophisticated machine learning algorithms to detect potential IOCs, indicators of compromise. Then we use AI to instantly generate threat narratives to get those out to our clients instantly. So a lot of things that MSPs might not be able to do. And then, of course, the third category, which ideally we wish we wouldn't have to even talk about this, but unfortunately in the field we see it all too often, that teams just give up. They just don't have the bandwidth to look at the alerts, and they go the out of sight, out of mind approach, and where they just basically ignore it and hope for the best. And of course that leaves them wide open. And that's the cases that then they get breached, and the superintendent has to go and put out a press release and say, yes, we were attacked and we were hacked. And this is LA Unified. Over a year ago, I chose this because it's such a big incident, was all over the news. But yeah, so superintendent has to admit that the data was released. And it's not just any data that we're talking about. It's highly sensitive data. It's medical records. It's psych evals. It's abuse allegations. So these are basically criminal investigation records. Highly sensitive stuff. And then, of course, you have your normal things like test results, financial records, birth certificates, social security numbers, bank account information. And once this type of data is out, it's devastating for the families and for the school district. And I chuckle when I see this, because this news report very politely says that the families were frustrated. But in this case, they were way more than frustrated. The community was angry, and they were, they were yelling, not yelling literally, but at the school board. The school board was looking at the superintendent. The superintendent was looking at their IT team, and it was not a pretty situation. And then what we see a lot in real life, in real situations, talking to these districts, and then I plucked this right out of from the news because it's just recently happened, I think last week, where districts, after they had an attack, after they had the incident, that's when all of a sudden budget is available, and that's when the superintendent says, "Oh yeah, so now we'll look into it and we'll make sure to strengthen our systems for future threats." Well, it's too late. So this waiting game is very, very dangerous, and we know that a lot of times the IT director, the CTO, they know what they need, but often, unfortunately, it's the CBO or the super who block, who don't release the budget for a cybersecurity initiative. And just recently, I was talking to a school district, and they had this problem. And this is a real true story. The superintendent said, "No, we can't roll out cybersecurity right now. We have to do it next year, because this year we have to digitize 5 tons of paper records that are sitting in the basement." So those are the priorities that we have to weigh. And yeah, I know digitizing the records is important, but I think everyone kind of agrees that cybersecurity is more important right now. That's the point we're trying to make, and we're trying to educate people on that. Because another scenario, another example, Glendale Unified, in our backyard here in California. They're located 30 minutes north of us, up in LA. And they got breached by Medusa just before Christmas. It was all over the news because Medusa took down 3 districts in just a couple of days. And Glendale, we talked to them. A few months before that, we talked to them, and we discussed what things we can do to improve their cybersecurity defense, things that we can help them with to be more secure and streamline some things and elevate their level of protection. They said, "No, thanks, we're okay." And they played the waiting game, and 3 months later, they got breached in a bad way. So I don't know to this date if they underestimated the threat that they were up against, or if they overestimated their existing security protection. So, but they miscalculated one way or the other. And interesting in this scenario with Medusa. So this is a ransomware as a service group, and what I said earlier, that districts of all shapes and sizes are being uh, targeted or not targeted indiscriminately. That is the numbers game, the wide net they cast. In this case, 3 districts were breached in just a day or two. One was Glendale with over 30 schools. The other one was Hinsdale with 3 schools, or 2 schools technically, because 2 of the schools are in the same building. And then the third school in this series was I forgot the name, in somewhere in the south center of the states, Louisiana or something, 10 school district. So across the board, regardless of size or urban or rural, everyone is a danger. So, with all that said, the good news is there's a lot of different tools and strategies and solutions that school districts can implement to, in fact, protect themselves against these many different threats. And Jeff will tell us a lot more about these things. And looking forward to that. Jeff, do you want to take it away?
Absolutely. Thanks, Daniel. Lots of great information on the unique challenges that school districts are facing. And now we want to discuss some of the budget-friendly essential solutions that can help you guys. For starters, you want a robust and trusted and cost-effective antivirus solution. This is still a must-have solution in this day and age because you still need to have a solution that is going to detect known threats, and you want that to be easily deployable as well. Plenty do leverage Microsoft Defender these days. The definitions are updated very frequently, so it is a pretty solid antivirus these days. However, you don't want just an antivirus. You should at least have some type of EDR, even if it's self-managed. That's typically going to be cheaper if you're managing it yourself, but that does introduce additional overhead and tasks on top of what you guys are already doing. Just to give a quick example of one, Microsoft Defender for endpoint with the A5 P2 license giving you the EDR, that would be an example of one that we commonly see school districts adopt. But piggybacking off the endpoint solutions like antivirus and EDR, you're also going to have some type of endpoint firewall on there. Typically, that will be Windows Firewall. But you don't want to just look at the endpoint. We're talking in a more holistic fashion here. So in addition to that, you want to have inter-VLAN firewall rules. Hopefully your student and staff and admin, sysadmin type roles are segmented into their own VLANs and have either ACLs or switch firewall rules in between that. That way you don't have students hopping on with their cell phone or something like that. You don't want them being able to even contact your domain controller, or if you're self-hosting your SIS, things like that, you want those rules to be solid. But in addition to that, you also should have some type of perimeter firewall. Just to give an example, something like a FortiGate is fairly common, and that's going to be typically a more robust appliance from a physical standpoint. MFA, this should absolutely be implemented wherever possible. At least on the IT staff should have MFA, and ideally teachers as well. We understand that this is a bit of a unique challenge when it comes to students with personal devices that may not be supplied by the school, and we fully understand that can be very challenging, but wherever you can, best practice to do that. And if you did want to introduce it with students in some way, and these cell phones are not a realistic possibility. There are alternative non-app based hardware solutions such as RSA Secure ID, but those are not as cost effective as something like an app-based solution, but we do just want to mention that. Vulnerability scanning would be another great essential budget option there. And we know some schools, the state may offer you a free external vulnerability scan once a year. We definitely recommend taking advantage of that. We'll dive more into this on an upcoming slide here. Next, you want email content and DNS filtering, which chances are you guys are probably doing already. That's pretty standard for a school, but it is very important. This is going to reduce spam and malicious emails, some phishing attempts, and overall, it's just going to reduce your chance of being compromised if that filter is really solid. And while all these solutions are great to have and very essential, you don't want to assume that nothing's going to go wrong. You always want to assume the worst, Murphy's Law kind of situation. And that's where the incident response plan or the IRP comes in. This serves as a break glass in case of emergency type of plan. The last thing you want to do is be trying to figure out what to do in the event of a breach. It's a very stressful time. So you want to have a plan ready to go, especially since if you have school nurses, you're subject to HIPAA compliance, or maybe entities that you need to contact in the event of that. And that's where the plan is really going to come in, so you can hit the ground running and at least mitigate the damage as much as possible there. And lastly, we have security awareness training. We really can't stress the importance of this enough. And it really does just reduce the chances of breaching and social engineering attacks in general. And so we discussed the essential solutions, but we don't want to end there. We would like to add on top of that and highlight a more recommended solution setup here. So a managed EDR, that would be first on the list there. That's going to take the burden off of you in terms of configuring those rules and maintaining it. It's going to alleviate a lot of burden. And MXDR, at least on your critical systems, we would recommend putting that everywhere possible that is feasible. That will give you a lot more holistic visibility with threat hunting and ideally a SOC team that's going to review all that for you. And network infrastructure and monitoring, we would recommend having that integrated in a SIEM as well, because as we discussed earlier, there are so many thousands of events occurring, whether it's on your endpoints or network traffic. You have traffic going everywhere, outgoing, incoming, and moving laterally east to west. So very important to be aware of what that's doing. That's going to provide a lot more visibility and going to give teams a lot more capability to string together events and make sure that we're not leaving any blind spots there. And cloud app monitoring, really no one is all on-prem these days. We live in kind of a SaaS and PaaS world where schools, for instance, will commonly use either Microsoft 365 or G Suite. If you're only looking at on-prem activity, there's a lot being unchecked there. It's absolutely crucial to tap into your cloud infrastructure as well and look for any potential indicators of compromise. Honeypots and canaries. This one is, to be honest, quite a bit overlooked. We actually did a webinar not too long ago on overlooked solutions where this was covered. And really what this is going to do, and we'll cover it more on an upcoming slide here, this is going to allow you to stay really one step ahead of the attacker. It adds an extra layer of protection where if an intruder gets in, you're going to know very, very early from that honeypot and canary. Penetration testing or breach and attack simulation tools, or just adversary emulation in general. All these solutions, very great and nice to have and protect you a lot, but you don't want to just assume that it's doing its job. You want to kick the tires on it, so to speak, and make sure that your EDR is actually doing what it's claiming to do. Is it protecting you against credential theft and things like that? Really good to just not assume it's doing the role and make sure with demonstrative results that it is doing what it says it's doing. Next would be a managed SIEM. We have seen districts try to do this themselves, as Daniel mentioned earlier, and really it's too much. You should have a team that is going to manage that for you and keep up with all the threats that come on the digital landscape daily, and keeping up with NIST, CISA, MITRE attack chain, and just really staying one step ahead of the threats as much as possible. Next would be SOAR, or alert playbooks. This goes along with a full service live SOC team where if something does occur, there are IOCs where there's either autonomous or semi-autonomous plans or rules where that attack will be mitigated either automatically or having a team dive in and alleviate that if it can't be done with the preset automated rules. A next-gen firewall, and this goes back to that perimeter firewall that we touched on a little earlier in the essential solutions. Ideally, that should be integrated in the SIM as well, much like the network switches. And if you wanted additional protection there, enabling the intrusion detection system or the intrusion detection or the intrusion protection system, that's going to not only protect you just more automatically, so to speak, on your own infrastructure, but it's also going to give you additional logging there, which will allow teams to help you, the SOC team in particular, more effectively. And we discussed external only vulnerability scanning, but you don't want to just scan one. You do want ideally both. We'll dive more into that shortly, but we would recommend, attacks can come from anywhere, so you do want to do both those if possible. That way you're patching things before an attacker can compromise you. And lastly, we have after hours and holiday remediation. Peace of mind is really important here. The last thing that you guys want while you're on Christmas vacation or something like that, trying to enjoy your much deserved time off. Unfortunately, ID fraud and data theft really skyrocket during the holiday season. And having a team that's on guard and watching your back with after hours and holiday remediation, you can sleep a lot easier. And so we want to dive into just a couple of these solutions that we mentioned and highlight the ones we feel are really important. So this is specifically talking about internal vulnerability scans. We personally use Qualys for this. We found that to be very reliable and the reporting is solid. This example here would be there was a default login that was left. Anyone could just type in admin or admin password. And a lot of times stuff like this can go unchecked. Someone deploys it and then they never actually change the credentials there. Another just quick example here, about a month back, we found during a vulnerability scan, someone didn't know they had a Windows XP machine running still. Someone set that up, never retired it. So that's another really good added value to vulnerability assessments. We found other stuff besides that, but just finding that XP machine alone made the whole scan worth it. That was just kind of a sitting duck and it was internet facing. So really crucial to do internal vulnerability scans as well. And next would be the honeypots and canaries. We want to highlight the difference between a honeypot and a canary, because this is a common question we get. Essentially, a honeypot is the portion of it that mimics really whatever you want. You can make that look like a Synology NAS. You can make that look like an OWA server. You can make that look like a network switch. It's very highly configurable, at least a good honeypot will. But it's important to keep strategy in mind here, because if you just employ every listening service possible, one of the first things an attacker is going to do is scan your network for any critical assets they want to compromise. And if the attacker sees, we call it a Christmas tree, if you have just everything listening at once, and if the attacker knows what they're doing, they're going to see that, say that's a honeypot, and they're just going to skirt around it. Not what you want. The other part of the solution is what actually alerts you, which would be the canary. You can think of that as the canary chirping or singing. So as that attacker comes in, scans your network for assets, the canary is going to pick that up and alert accordingly. And a good honeypot and canary solution will provide both of these components neatly combined into one. And we do recommend having one canary deployed per VLAN. That way, no matter where the attacker enters, when they do that network scan, trying to compromise you, the canary is going to pick up on that and alert accordingly. Next would be an incident response plan. This is an example of one we did for San Marino Unified School District. They were kind enough to allow us to share this as an example. And just again, this is going to serve as in case of emergency, break glass kind of thing, where you have a plan in place where you can not only contain the threat, but contact who you need to contact for disclosures. And it's going to be, hopefully you never have to use it, but you want to have it just in case something does happen. You don't want to assume that nothing bad will happen. Even with all these protections in place, a IRP is very much needed. And security awareness training, we do want to highlight this because, again, we really can't stress enough how far this goes. Solutions aren't the only way to protect yourself. You can, a little bit of common sense does go a long way. We personally use CyberReady as a partner. But the reality is, the larger your organization is, it's unfortunate that we have to think of it this way, but the human element is often the weakest part of cybersecurity. That's why phishing and tricking users is so common. It's much easier to trick a person than it is to thwart actual security, which, to be honest, is pretty good these days overall. But we still have that human element we got to worry about. So the larger your organization is, the more users you have, which means the more potential points of compromise that you actually have. So the more users in your organization are educated and go through security awareness training, they know the red flags to watch out for and scammer tactics, things like that. It's really going to protect your environment quite a bit in addition to all these solutions. And we just want to mention that security awareness training was very dry and kind of boring in the past. It really has come a long way. It's a lot more engaging and, to be honest, pretty fun.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Wow, that was a lot. Much appreciated. Quick, another reminder here. So if anything, any other solutions, the tools, strategies we just touched on, and I know it was a lot, and you know we can't go as deep as we want in for all of them or any of them. Just shoot Jeff an email. I'll put up his contact information in a minute, but feel free to send Jeff an email and say, hey, you know, you talked about that. You know, what should I do? I have got a couple questions. He'll be happy to help you out and as much as he can. And then, of course, we do have a couple questions here. So we still have enough time to answer more questions. Feel free to put them in the Q&A, and we'll try to get them all covered. First question is as follows. How much would it cost to hire a cybersecurity engineer to handle this if we wanted to do it in-house? I can take that, Jeff. Feel free to jump in if I miss anything. But so I guess it depends a lot. We do discuss this with school districts regularly. And one way or the other, basically, it's always a lot more cost effective to work with an MXDR provider. It'll be a fraction of the cost of hiring a security engineer, whatever it is. But I think depending on geography and, of course, the level of experience of that person, I would say between 100 and 150K a year. so yeah, if you work with a good MXDR partner, you're looking at, you're looking at a fraction. Plus, you don't have to constantly train that person, and then once you've got him trained or her, then they leave for another district. So yeah, but yeah, thanks for the question there. Next question is, what is the benefit of doing external and internal vulnerability scanning? Okay, that's a question for you, Jeff, if you want to reiterate on what we said earlier.
Yeah, no worries. And by the way, Daniel, I think your estimate was pretty on point there. But as far as the external and internal vulnerability scanning, the reality is threats can come from anywhere, and if you just check one of those, you're really missing out. You're missing some blind spots there. So external issues, schools in general host a lot of stuff, public websites. A lot of times that's tied to the domain in other ways. And external, very crucial from that standpoint. For internal, you really want to patch those vulnerabilities. And like I mentioned with the example on the real world example of the XP machine that we caught for one of our customers, things like that, you very much want to be privy to. Vulnerability scans are one of the best ways to catch that. Systems that should have been retired that weren't, or just finding listening ports in your environment that you didn't know were on. Just to give a quick example, a lot of you probably use quite a bit of printers, and a lot of times those will have every service enabled by default. They got SNMP 1 and 2, and they got a web server on there, FTP, all kinds of stuff that you may not necessarily even be using. So really, you just want to scan all your ends. Any way an attacker can potentially compromise you, you want to have that covered and be aware of the threats.
Yeah, and I can add something to that, because from an account management perspective, working with these districts, we always see how underrated it kind of is, vulnerability assessments, but then we run those, and in our case, we run them typically quarterly, and depending on the size of the district, we're finding hundreds of level 5 critical vulnerabilities that the district had no idea they had. And then we help them, of course, work with the client, help them prioritize and address them as much as possible before they can be exploited. But it's probably one of the most effective services that we offer. Okay, we got a couple more questions in. Next question is, if we have our own EDR already, could we upgrade to your MXDR solution? I'll take that, Jeff. So yes, answer is yes. Our platform is certainly compatible with pretty much all other common EDR solutions out there. I don't think we've come across one that we couldn't integrate with. So yeah, we can plug into that. We can leverage that investment that if you have made that in the past, and then we take those alerts and route them through our system, through our platform, and then of course we can put our MXDR service on top of it for advanced threat hunting and these things. But then also, if you want to switch at one point, we provide our own EDR that then customers sometimes they run out the contract with their existing EDR, and then they can switch over to ours. And like I said, in the meantime, we just leverage what they have in place. I hope that answered their question. And then last question, we have a couple minutes still, so if there's any other questions, shoot them over. But for now, last question will be, how often should we do security awareness training? Jeff, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. So the answer there, it's a bit of a tricky answer, because my answer would really be it should be ongoing and continuous as much as possible. But at the same time, that's not really reality. If you could do it every day, that is, of course, ideal. There's more threats that come across the digital landscape. Attacks get more sophisticated, and as a result, these cybersecurity trainings are regularly updated. But from a practical standpoint, we understand you can't necessarily do this every day or gather students every day to run through this. So as much as possible would be my answer there. And we just want to throw out there that our partner again is CyberReady that we personally use. They do actually have a 90-day full-featured free trial if you wanted to give that a go, see how you like it. But yeah, the short answer would be as much as possible there, which is as much as is feasible within your district with the time and resources you have.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I actually have some previous experience in the security awareness training industry, and yeah, I would completely agree with your assessment there, Jeff. Very important topic. Low-hanging fruit. At the end of the day, you can get really cost-effective solutions, which Jeff said a few times earlier, goes a long way in terms of protection. All right, if there are no other questions, want to bang the drum real quick for our next webinar in October. And this will be a fun one. This will be exciting. We'll have two folks on the call joining us, special guests, I should call them, and they'll have a conversation talking about experiences, crazy stories that they've had. They'll discuss technologies, challenges, opportunities for school districts as far as K-12 IT and cybersecurity is concerned. Gil Mara, the CTO at Torrance USD, is actually one of our customers. And then John Speratos he's got 30 plus years. He just retired, but he's a huge resource. He has 20 years of IT director at school district Los Alamitos, and then 15 or so years as a CTO at a community college. So K-12 and higher ed experience. It'll be a great conversation. So looking forward to that. Please mark your calendars. Yeah, and here is the information. Jeff Teitelbaum, shoot him an email if you have any questions about any of the stuff we covered. Again, I'm dead serious when I say he loves spreading the word and helping people implement these kinds of solutions and answering questions. And then, of course, I'm always available as well. I know you guys are busy. It's back to school for many of you. I can't believe you even joined us for this webinar at this time. Other districts are going back to school next week, so I know it's a busy time. Thanks for spending a few minutes with us today.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.